This face sits in a Berlin museum as the global benchmark for ancient beauty. In the popular imagination, Nefertiti is a passive, regal icon, a frozen relic of a distant past. Her true historical potential was far more lethal. She was the theoretical mastermind of the world's first totalitarian regime. Her actual failure had little to do with her fanatical worship of the sun god Aten. She failed because she prioritized religious ecstasy over the strategic application of violence. A radical new ideology requires the edge of a blade to survive the reality of politics. Devotion alone is insufficient to change the world. This stone relief from 1336 BC documents the most radical political pivot of the ancient world. Look at the sun disk, the Aten. Nefertiti and her husband Akhenaten attempted to dissolve centuries of tradition by enforcing the worship of a single deity. To protect their new faith, they committed a catastrophic strategic error. They abandoned the political capital of Thebes to isolate themselves here, at Amarna, a utopian city built in the middle of a desolate desert. This geographic retreat left the powerful priests of the old god Amun fully operational. While the royal couple focused on hymns in the desert, their enemies remained in the shadows of the old capital, quietly plotting a counter-revolution. Isolating a new regime while leaving the old power structures intact is an invitation for political collapse. The breaking point occurs in the 12th year of their reign. The empire is losing territory to the Hittites, and Akhenaten is increasingly paralyzed by his own religious visions. In our history, this is where Nefertiti's influence begins to evaporate. In this alternate timeline, Nefertiti recognizes that the revolution is dying. She executes a palace coup, placing her husband under permanent house arrest and declaring him too holy to govern a kingdom of men. She assumes singular authority, taking the throne as the sole pharaoh under the name Neferneferuaten. Power is inherently intolerant of weakness. To preserve the state, she removes the very person who started the revolution. Nefertiti immediately reverses her husband's policy of isolation. She returns to Thebes, not as a pilgrim, but as an executioner. She initiates a systematic purge of the old religious order. She doesn't simply close the temples, she executes the high clergy, physically erasing the institutional memory of the old gods to ensure they can never return to power. This relief of Egyptian chariot archers illustrates the shift in her domestic policy. She confiscates the immense wealth of the dead priesthood and redirects those riches to fund a professional, secular military that answers only to her. An ideological revolution requires the total liquidation of its predecessors and absolute monopoly on physical force. Look at the rays of the sun ending in hands. Nefertiti weaponized this imagery, branding herself as the literal, living sun on earth. She transformed her appearance into a tool of political propaganda to command absolute submission. This cliffside tomb represents the old Egyptian economy, where a massive percentage of the national GDP was buried with the dead. Nefertiti ends this practice. Since the god is present in the living pharaoh, elaborate preparations for the afterlife become a waste of state resources. The gold and labor once spent on mountains of stone are now funneled into technological innovation and aggressive imperial expansion. Dictatorship relies on two primary pillars: physical dominance through the army and total psychological ownership of the state's cultural output. The historical collapse of the Bronze Age was triggered by decentralized kingdoms failing to defend against nomadic sea invaders. In this timeline, Nefertiti's centralized Egyptian navy, funded by the sea's treasures of the old gods, crushes these incursions before they reach the shore. By preserving the Mediterranean's vital trade routes, she keeps the gears of global civilization turning, effectively bypassing the regressive chaos of the Dark Ages. With a permanent Egyptian global empire, the conditions that birthed Christianity, Islam, and Judaism never occur. The traditional nodes of Rome, Mecca, and Jerusalem never develop into religious centers. By the year 2026, humanity has mastered 100% solar energy. This wasn't driven by environmentalism, but by 1,000 years of religious duty to harvest the power of the Aten. This global civilization is a dominant matriarchy, governed by leaders who model their authority on the veneration of the eternal Nefertiti. Solving the historical conflicts of energy and religion required the absolute centralization of a single global ideology. This stability has a dark reality. This world has enjoyed 2,000 years without a religious war, but it has lived under 2,000 years of absolute despotism. In this society, individual opinion is non-existent. Every person is merely a single ray serving the disk of the sun. In our reality, Nefertiti chose to be a wife instead of an executioner. Because she hesitated to seize total power, her enemies were able to eventually erase her name from the very walls of her temples. Absolute power requires two components, a vision for the light and a blade for the shadows. Nefertiti attempted the vision, but faltered at the blade, leaving those who followed to live in the shadows cast by her enemies.